How Google Works by Eric Schmidt and Jonathan Rosenberg. Picture this. It's a lazy Friday afternoon in May 2002 at Google, back when it was still this buzzing little startup. Larry Page, one of the founders, brilliant guy, restless as hell, is casually searching his own website. He types in Kawasaki H1B. He's not hunting for an immigration lawyer. The man wants a vintage motorcycle. But the ads lighting up his screen? All law firms. He tries again. French cave paintings. Up pops an ad cheerfully, offering to, quote, buy French cave paintings from some random online store. Larry is absolutely horrified. Here's the thing. His company's entire mission is to organize the world's information and make it actually useful. But these ads, they're garbage. Digital noise. Clutter. To put it bluntly, they suck. Now, most company founders would have immediately called an emergency meeting, right? Hauled in the advertising department head, demanded presentations, launched a whole corporate initiative with action plans and timelines. But Google? Google wasn't playing by normal rules. Larry doesn't call anyone, doesn't fire off a single email. He just prints out those terrible search results, grabs a marker, and walks to the kitchen. He pins the pages to the bulletin board next to the pool table and scrawls across the top in big, angry letters. These ads suck. Then he goes home for the weekend. That's it. That one frustrated gesture would trigger a chain reaction that didn't just change Google forever. It revealed the secret DNA of building truly revolutionary companies. It's a story that shows us a completely different way of thinking about business, leadership, and what talented people can actually accomplish. Today, we're diving into How Google Works, written by two executives who were brought in to provide what they called adult supervision to this chaotic startup, Eric Schmidt and Jonathan Rosenberg. This isn't just Google's story. It's a survival guide for the internet century. And I promise, by the time we're done, you'll understand the unwritten rules that let ordinary people build extraordinary things. You'll learn how to attract brilliant minds, create environments where they thrive, and make decisions that don't just help you compete, they help you change the entire game. This is the story of how two seasoned executives had to unlearn everything they thought they knew about business, taught by the very people they were supposed to manage. Let's dive in. To really get what Eric Schmidt and Jonathan Rosenberg walked into, imagine this. You're a successful executive. You've run major companies, managed thousands of employees, earned your MBA, memorized the corporate playbook front to back. Then you show up at early 2000s Google and realize nobody here has even cracked open that playbook. Actually, they're writing a completely new one, and rule number one is, engineers run the show. When Eric Schmidt arrived for his first day as the new CEO, he couldn't even access his own office. A group of software engineers had decided it was a great workspace and just moved in. Instead of pulling rank and kicking them out, Eric, the CEO, quietly found himself a tiny closet-sized office down the hall. A few weeks later, he shows up to find he's got a new roommate. An engineer named Amit Patel had decided Eric's small office was still bigger than his, so he just set up shop. They shared that office for months. This wasn't a company where your importance was measured by office size. It operated on completely different values. This was the world created by two Stanford PhD students, Larry Page and Sergey Brin. They didn't have business degrees, and they saw that as a feature, not a bug. Their principles were beautifully simple. Number one, focus on the user, and everything else follows. Build the best search engine in the world, and the money will figure itself out later. Their strategy for building the world's best anything? Equally simple. Hire as many talented software engineers as possible, then give them freedom. This is where it gets interesting. Into this chaotic, brilliant, engineer-driven world walks Jonathan Rosenberg, a seasoned product executive with an MBA. He's hired to bring discipline and structure to product development. He arrives confident he's exactly what they need. A few months in, he presents Larry Page with what he considers a masterpiece, a product plan with schedules, milestones, approvals, a beautiful 2-year roadmap. Everything a textbook would tell you a proper business plan should be. He's expecting applause. Larry Page hates it. He looks at Jonathan and asks a devastatingly simple question. Have you ever seen a scheduled plan that the team beat? Jonathan has to admit, no. Have your teams ever delivered better products than what was in the plan? No again. Then what's the point? Larry concludes. It's holding us back. There must be a better way. Just go talk to the engineers. That phrase, just go talk to the engineers, was Jonathan's wake-up call. The engineers at Google weren't just coders. They were brilliant, business-savvy, creative powerhouses. Constraining them with traditional plans and processes would be, as Larry put it, stupid. This brings us to the central drama. In 2003, Microsoft, internally codenamed Finland, was the most powerful tech company on the planet, and it was gearing up to crush this little Mountain View startup. Google's board of directors, quite reasonably, demanded a plan, a real MBA-style business plan detailing exactly how they'd fight back. Eric and Jonathan were stuck. The board was right. You can't take on the biggest gorilla in the jungle without a plan, but they also knew a traditional business plan would be rejected by Google's culture. It would be like transplanting an alien organ into the company's body, and the immune system, those brilliant engineers, would attack it immediately. Even worse, Larry and Sergey would kill it before it ever launched. So what did they do? They created something that looked enough like a plan to satisfy the board, but was really a declaration of principles. No financial projections, no market research, no org charts. Just a simple statement. To compete with Microsoft, Google would focus on users and build excellent products. That was it. That was the plan. And it worked beyond their wildest dreams. Why? Because they realized that in the internet century, the old business rules were dead. Success wasn't about controlling information or distribution. It was about product excellence. And product excellence could only happen by attracting a new kind of employee and creating the right environment for them. The authors call this new breed a smart creative. This is the most important concept in the entire book. A smart creative isn't your typical knowledge worker. Knowledge workers are experts in narrow fields who follow the rules. Smart creatives are a different species entirely. They have deep technical knowledge, but they blend it with business savvy and powerful creativity. They're not just thinkers, they're doers. They don't just design concepts, they build working prototypes. They're driven by data, but not paralyzed by it. They're their own focus group, constantly using and testing what they build. Smart creatives get bored easily. They ask uncomfortable questions. They challenge everything. They're not afraid to fail, because failure is just learning in disguise. They don't wait to be told what to do. They take initiative. And most importantly, you cannot tell them how to think. If you can't tell people how to think, you have to manage the environment where they think. You have to make it a place they actually want to be every day. And this brings us back to that note on the wall. These ads suck. When Larry put that note up, he didn't issue orders. He didn't create a task force. He simply identified a problem that violated the company's core mission. What happened next? A small group of engineers who didn't even work on the ads team saw the note. They understood the problem. They agreed it was real. And because they were smart creatives, empowered by the company's culture, they decided to fix it. Over the weekend. Monday morning, they sent an email not just agreeing with Larry, but with a full problem analysis, a proposed solution, and a link to a working prototype they'd already built. That solution, ranking ads based on relevance and usefulness to users, not just advertiser bids, became the foundation of Google's multi-billion-dollar advertising business. No manager's plan created this breakthrough. The culture did. The culture attracted the right people, smart creatives, and those people created the magic. So how do you build a culture like that? The authors lay out a fascinating set of counterintuitive principles. First, keep them crowded. Forget corner offices. Forget quiet, spacious cubicles. Offices should be designed to maximize energy and interaction. When you can literally reach out and tap someone on the shoulder, Ideas flow freely. The default should be loud, boisterous collaboration. Quiet spaces should be the exception you retreat to, not the norm. This also kills office envy beautifully. When nobody has a private office, nobody complains about not having one. And those crowded offices, let them be messy. Messiness is a byproduct of self-expression and innovation. It's a sign people are busy, stimulated, making things. A sterile, perfectly clean office often signals a sterile, uncreative culture. Of course, it's not just about cramming people together. You have to give them the tools they need. Google is a computer science company, so they give engineers access to the most powerful data centers and software platforms in the world. The rule is simple. Be stingy with things that don't matter, like fancy furniture, but incredibly generous with resources people need to do their work. And yes, all those famous perks, free food, gyms, volleyball courts, they're not about luxury. They're about creating an environment where people want to be, where random encounters happen, where the line between work and life blurs positively. AdSense, a multi-billion-dollar product, was famously invented by engineers from different teams playing pool together in the office. Next, you have to change how decisions get made. In most companies, decisions are dominated by the hippo, the highest-paid person's opinion. The boss speaks, everyone else nods like bobbleheads. Google works to create a true meritocracy, where the quality of the idea matters, not who suggests it. This requires a culture with an obligation to dissent. If you see something wrong, you must speak up. If you don't, and the bad idea wins, you're just as responsible. This is how you kill the fear culture where hippos thrive. To make this work, the organization itself needs to be different. The authors advocate for flat structures, guided by what they call the Rule of 7. At most companies, this means a manager should have a maximum of 7 direct reports. At Google, it means they should have a minimum of 7. Most managers have far more. With that many direct reports, you simply can't micromanage. You're forced to give people freedom and autonomy. And what about crazy long-shot ideas, the ones that seem too risky or too far out? This is where the 70/20 rule comes in. It's a simple framework for allocating resources. 70% of resources go to the core business, things already successful that pay the bills. 20% go to emerging projects, new ideas showing promise that could be the next big thing. And 10% go to brand new, completely speculative, high-risk ideas. This 10% is crucial. It ensures crazy ideas get some support, but also protects them from being overfunded. Creativity loves constraints. Lack of resources forces ingenuity. When Larry Page first had the idea to scan every book ever published, he didn't assemble a massive team with a huge budget. He rigged a digital camera to a tripod in his office, used a metronome to pace his movements, and started photographing a book page by page, while a colleague turned pages. From that crude, low-cost prototype, Google Books was born. This experimentation spirit is baked into culture through the famous 20% time. This policy lets engineers spend 1 day a week working on whatever they want. It's not really about time, the authors clarify. It's about freedom. It's a check on managers who might be too quick to say no. It's permission to work on something you're passionate about, even if it's not your official job. Many of Google's most successful products, like Google News and AdSense, started as 20% projects. It's the ultimate expression of trust in your smart creatives. But having great culture is only half the battle. You need a solid business foundation. And this is where the authors deliver another shocking piece of advice. Your plan is wrong. No matter how brilliant your business plan is, it's flawed. The world changes too fast. Venture capitalists don't invest in plans. They invest in teams, because great teams will recognize their plans' flaws and adapt. So instead of rigid plans, you need a stable foundation of principles. The first principle is to bet on technical insights, not market research. Market research tells you what customers say they want. It leads to incremental improvements. Henry Ford famously said, "If I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses." A true technical insight is a new way of applying technology or design that creates something fundamentally better, something new and surprising and radically useful. Google search itself was built on a technical insight. You could rank web page quality by looking at how many other pages linked to it. This was completely revolutionary. The book overflows with examples. AdWords was based on the insight that ads could be ranked as information. Google News was based on the insight that you could group stories algorithmically by topic, not by source. The second foundational principle is to optimize for growth. In the internet century, you don't just grow, you scale. This means growing very quickly and globally. To do this, you need to build platforms, not just products. A platform is something others can build on top of. Android is a platform. YouTube is a platform. These platforms become more valuable as more people use them. Early on, Google focused relentlessly on growing its user base, even when it wasn't making much money. They knew that if they built a massive, loyal audience, the business model would follow. They were generous with partners, sharing as much revenue as possible to encourage ecosystem growth. And the best way to scale a platform? Default to open, not closed. This is deeply counterintuitive for traditional business leaders, who are taught to build competitive advantages and defend them like fortresses. An open model means sharing intellectual property, using open standards, and making it easy for customers to leave. You trade control for scale and innovation. Android is the perfect example. Google made the operating system open source, available for any hardware manufacturer to use free. Apple, with iOS, took the opposite approach, maintaining complete control. Both have been massively successful. But the authors argue that unless you have a once-in-a-generation genius like Steve Jobs at the helm, who can be right almost all the time, defaulting to open is the better strategy. It lets you harness talents of thousands of people outside your company and drives innovation across an entire ecosystem. Of course, none of this works without the right people. And this brings us to what the authors call the single most important thing any manager does: hiring. In most companies, hiring is a chore delegated to recruiters. At Google, it's a core responsibility for everyone, especially senior leaders. They realize that a workforce of great people doesn't just do great work, it attracts more great people. It's called the herd effect. A players hire A players. But B players, fearing competition, tend to hire C players. Compromise on quality even once, and you start a downward spiral. So how do you find the right people? The authors say look for learning animals. These are people who aren't just smart. They have insatiable curiosity and character that loves challenges. You hire them not for what they already know, but for their ability to learn what they don't yet know. In interviews, you're not just looking for raw intelligence. You're looking for passion, character, and grit. A good character test is what they call the LAX test. Imagine being stuck in the Los Angeles airport with this person for 6 hours. Would you enjoy the conversation? Would you learn something? Or would you be desperately looking for an escape? You want to hire interesting people. People with unique perspectives and hobbies. People engaged with the world. And the hiring decision itself, it should never be left to a single hiring manager. Human nature gets in the way. A manager might hesitate to hire someone smarter than them. So at Google, hiring decisions are made by a committee of peers. The hiring manager has veto power. They can say no, but they can't unilaterally say yes. The committee reviews a detailed hiring packet, filled with interview data and references, ensuring decisions are based on merit, not politics or personal bias. Once you have these amazing people, you have to reward them appropriately. The authors believe in disproportionate rewards for disproportionate impact. In sports, a superstar player makes hundreds of times more than a rookie. The same should be true in business. A smart creative who has massive product impact should be paid outrageously well, regardless of title or tenure. The final puzzle piece is how you make decisions and communicate in this chaotic, fast-moving environment. The goal is to achieve consensus, but the authors have a very specific definition of this word. It doesn't mean getting everyone to agree. That just creates a room full of bobbleheads nodding yes, who then leave and do whatever they wanted anyway. True consensus means arriving at the best idea for the company and getting everyone to commit to it, even if they don't personally agree. And the only way to get there is through open debate and conflict. A leader's job isn't to state their opinion first, but to ensure every voice is heard. Once the decision is made, everyone must either commit or escalate. No passive-aggressive sabotage allowed. To fuel these debates, you need data. In every Google conference room, there are two projectors. One for the presentation, the other for data. You don't convince by saying, "I think." You convince by saying, "Let me show you." And finally, in this world of smart creatives, a leader's most important role is to be a damn good router. Your job isn't to hoard information, but to share it, to connect people, to connect ideas, and to ensure information flows freely throughout the organization. Your default mode should be open. At Google, after every board meeting, the entire presentation and board letter are shared with every single employee. This level of transparency builds trust and ensures everyone is aligned on company priorities. It starts with the CEO. Every quarter, Larry Page posts his own objectives and key results, his OKRs, for the entire company to see. Then he holds a meeting where he and his leadership team publicly grade themselves on how they performed against previous quarter goals, often with plenty of red marks for failure. This sets a powerful tone of transparency and accountability from the very top. How Google works is, at its heart, a transformation story. It's the story of how a company built on new rules for a new century changed the world. But it's also the story of how its leaders had to change themselves. They had to let go of control, embrace chaos, and learn to trust their people. They had to learn that in the internet century, the pyramids of the old corporate world are crumbling. The new world is being built by small teams of passionate, empowered smart creatives who aren't just imagining the unimaginable, they're building it. As we step back from the ideas in how Google works, what strikes me most is that this isn't really a technology book, it's a people book. It recognizes that in a world where technology has made so many things abundant, information, computing power, global reach, the one thing that remains truly scarce and infinitely valuable is human talent. Specifically, the talent of the smart creative. The most powerful lesson here is the complete inversion of the traditional management pyramid. For a century, business was about command and control. Leaders had the information, made the plans, and employees executed them. This book argues that model isn't just outdated, it's a recipe for failure in the 21st century. Your best people are no longer just executing your ideas. They are the source of your best ideas. Your job as a leader isn't to be the chief strategist, but the chief architect. The architect of an environment where brilliant people can do their best work. This is deeply humbling for any leader. It requires checking your ego at the door and admitting that the smartest people in the room probably aren't you. It requires shifting from managing people to cultivating talent. It's the difference between being a chess master, moving pieces around a board, and being a gardener, creating the right conditions for things to grow in ways you could never predict. And that's why this book matters so much, especially if you're just starting to think about your career and the kind of impact you want to have. You're entering a world that operates by these new rules. You're a native of the internet century. You have the opportunity not just to join a company, but to build something new, whether from scratch in your dorm room or from within an existing organization. So how can you start applying these principles right now? Here are a few thoughts. First, become a learning animal. Don't just focus on required classes. Pursue your curiosity. Learn to code, even if you're not a computer science major. Take a statistics class, because as the authors say, data is the sword of the 21st century. Read voraciously. Ask questions. Don't be afraid to look foolish by admitting what you don't know. Your ability to learn and adapt will be your single greatest asset. Second, practice being a damn good router. In your school projects, in your clubs, in your friendships. Don't hoard information. When you find a fascinating article, a great video, or a new idea, share it. Connect people who you think should know each other. The person who generously shares information and builds connections becomes a hub, a valuable center of their network. And third, start thinking 10x. Don't just ask how you can get a 10% better grade on your next test. Ask, what would it take to build a project so amazing it changes the way the entire class thinks about this subject? Thinking big is a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. It attracts other big thinkers and opens up possibilities you never would have seen otherwise. That was a summary of How Google Works by Eric Schmidt and Jonathan Rosenberg. We've journeyed through the core ideas today, but I'll be honest, a summary is like looking at a photograph of a great adventure. You can see where they went, but you can't feel the thrill of the journey itself. The real magic of this book is in the stories, the details, and how the principles connect to form a powerful philosophy. This summary is your map to help you decide if this adventure is one you want to take. If anything we've talked about today has sparked something in you, if it's made you think differently about what's possible, then I encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning business strategy. It's an experience that can genuinely change how you see your own potential and the future you can build. You can find a link to the book in the description below. Also, if you found this journey valuable, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. It tells us we're on the right path and ensures you won't miss our next exploration into another life-changing book from the billionaire's bookshelf. Let's keep learning and growing together.